You wake up, and before you've even had your coffee, you're already clearing your throat. Not because you're sick, not because you have a cold. There's just something there. A thickness. A tickle sitting low in your throat that never quite clears, no matter how many times you swallow, hum, or cough softly into your fist. Maybe it happens most in the morning. Maybe it shows up after meals or in the middle of an important conversation, forcing you to pause and clear your throat right when you least want to. Maybe you've started avoiding certain foods, certain drinks, even certain rooms in your house, quietly hoping something will make it stop. And here's the part that makes it so frustrating. You don't have a cold. You don't have the flu. Your nose isn't stuffy in any dramatic way. By every obvious measure, you're healthy. And yet that mucus, that phlegm, that need to constantly clear your throat just stays there, day after day, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. If this sounds familiar, I want you to know something important right away. This is not just one of those things. Your body is not being random or dramatic. This sensation, as small and irritating as it seems, is actual information. Your throat and the tissues around it are trying to tell you something specific about what's happening inside your airway, your digestive system, or your immune system. And once you understand what that something is, this problem often becomes far easier to manage. What makes this especially confusing is that many people have already tried the obvious things. They've cut back on dairy because someone told them dairy makes mucus worse. They drink more water. They've tried lozenges, throat sprays, humidifiers. And still, that phlegm sits there, stubborn and unmoved, like it has nowhere else to go. The truth is, chronic throat mucus almost never has just one single cause. It's usually the result of one or two specific triggers working quietly in the background, and most people never get pointed toward the actual source. They just keep clearing their throat, assuming it's normal, assuming there's nothing to be done. Before we go further, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest health tips. We share trusted, easy-to-understand health information designed especially for adults over 50 and seniors. Every week, you'll discover practical wellness advice, healthy lifestyle tips, and important warning signs that can help you stay healthier, more active, and better informed. Today, I want to walk you through 7 of the most common reasons your throat keeps producing mucus even when you're nowhere near sick, ranked from the more familiar to the one almost nobody talks about, even though it may be the biggest hidden driver of all. Along the way, we'll look at the small habits that quietly make things worse, and a simple daily routine that many people find genuinely helpful. And I'll tell you now, the reason sitting at the very top of this list surprised me the first time I really understood it, because in a lot of cases, it isn't something entering your throat at all. It's something your throat is doing to itself. Before we start the countdown, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and when does your throat mucus show up the most? Is it first thing in the morning? After eating? At night when you lie down? Drop a quick comment below. I read everyone, and it genuinely helps me understand what people are actually experiencing. Now, before we get into the list, let's take a short detour into some basic biology. Don't worry, this won't be technical. Think of it as a quick map that makes everything else make sense. Your throat, nose, and airway are lined with something called mucous membranes. These membranes constantly produce a thin layer of mucus, and this is completely normal and necessary. Mucus isn't the enemy. It's actually a protective coating. It traps dust, allergens, bacteria, and irritants before they can travel deeper into your lungs. It also keeps these delicate tissues moist because dry tissue is more easily damaged and more vulnerable to infection. Under normal, healthy conditions, your body produces a steady, thin stream of mucus, and you swallow most of it without ever noticing. It happens automatically, hundreds of times a day, without you giving it a single thought. But when something irritates, inflames, or overstimulates these membranes, whether that's an allergen, dry air, acid, or something else, your body responds the way it's designed to respond to any kind of stress. It produces more mucus, and often thicker mucus to try to flush the irritant out or form a stronger protective barrier. The problem is, this thicker mucus doesn't always drain the way it should. Sometimes it pools in the back of your throat. Sometimes it drips down slowly from your sinuses, a process often called postnasal drip. And your throat, sensing something sitting there that shouldn't be, sends an urge to clear it or cough it up, which is exactly the sensation so many people live with every single day. So the real question isn't, why do I have mucus? Mucus is normal. The real question is, what's quietly triggering my body to keep making extra of it? And that's exactly what we're about to look at. Let's begin with reason number 7, dehydration and dry air. This one is so simple that most people overlook it completely, but your mucous membranes rely heavily on moisture to function properly. When your body doesn't have enough fluid, or when the air around you is dry, the thin, easy-flowing mucus your throat normally produces becomes thicker and stickier. Thicker mucus doesn't glide down smoothly the way it's supposed to. It tends to sit, cling, and coat the back of your throat, which is exactly the sensation that makes you want to clear it constantly. This becomes especially noticeable in certain situations: heated indoor air during colder months, air conditioning running for hours at a time, long flights, or simply not drinking enough water throughout the day. Many people drink plenty of fluids with meals but go hours in between without any water at all, and that gap is often enough to let mucus thicken. A simple starting habit is to keep water within reach throughout the day rather than only drinking with meals, and to consider a humidifier in the room where you sleep, especially if you wake up with the most noticeable throat mucus. It's not a dramatic fix, but for a meaningful number of people, it makes a real difference within just a week or two. Now let's move to reason number 6, allergies you may not even realize you have. When people think of allergies, they often picture sneezing fits and itchy eyes during spring. But allergic reactions in the nose and throat can be far quieter than that and far more constant. Common household allergens like dust mites, pet dander, and mold don't disappear with the seasons. They're present year-round, which means the irritation they cause can also be a year-round, low-level presence rather than a dramatic flare-up. You'd immediately connect to allergies. When your immune system detects these particles, it releases compounds like histamine, which causes your nasal and throat tissues to become inflamed and to produce more mucus as a defensive response. Over time, this can become such a steady background pattern that you stop associating it with allergies at all. It just becomes how your throat is. One clue worth paying attention to: does your mucus feel worse in specific rooms, like a bedroom with an older mattress or carpet, or worse around certain times, like right after vacuuming or being around a pet? That kind of pattern is often a strong hint that allergens are playing a role. Simple steps like washing bedding in hot water weekly, using a good air filter, and reducing dust-collecting clutter in the bedroom can meaningfully cut down on the amount of allergen your throat is reacting to each night. Now, reason number 5, acid reflux, and specifically a quieter version of it called laryngopharyngeal reflux, or LPR. Most people associate reflux with heartburn, that burning feeling in the chest. But there's a lesser-known form of reflux where stomach acid travels high enough to reach the throat and voice box without ever causing the classic burning sensation at all. This is sometimes called silent reflux because so many people who have it never even suspect their stomach is involved. When that acid touches the delicate tissue of the throat, it irritates it, and irritated tissue responds the way irritated tissue always does. It produces more mucus to protect and coat itself. This is often why throat mucus tends to be worse in the morning specifically. Overnight, when you're lying flat, it becomes easier for stomach contents to travel upward. You wake up with a thick, sticky feeling in your throat, maybe some hoarseness, maybe a slightly sour taste, and you assume it's unrelated to your stomach entirely. Common contributors include eating large meals close to bedtime, lying down soon after eating, and regularly consuming things like caffeine, alcohol, or very fatty or spicy foods. all of which can relax the valve that's supposed to keep stomach contents where they belong. A helpful starting step is simply shifting your last meal earlier in the evening, ideally 2 to 3 hours before lying down, and noticing whether morning throat mucus improves over the following couple of weeks. Now for reason number 4, and this one might surprise you, dairy may not be the direct cause you think it is. For years, cut out dairy has been one of the most repeated pieces of advice for throat mucus. And to be fair, some people genuinely do notice a difference. But the science on this is more nuanced than most people realize. For most people, dairy doesn't dramatically increase mucus production the way it's often blamed for. What it can do is change the texture of the mucus you already have, making it feel thicker or more noticeable as it coats the throat, particularly right after drinking something like milk. That coating sensation can feel exactly like more mucus, even when the actual amount produced hasn't changed much at all. This matters because if dairy isn't your real trigger, cutting it out completely may bring little to no improvement, and you might spend months avoiding foods you enjoy, while the true underlying cause, whether that's allergies, reflux, or something else on this list, continues untouched. If you want to test this for yourself, a simple low-effort experiment is to notice whether your throat mucus feels different specifically within 30 minutes of consuming dairy versus how it feels the rest of the day. That kind of direct observation tells you far more than a blanket rule ever could. Now, reason number 3, chronic postnasal drip from sinus congestion. This one is closely connected to allergies, but it deserves its own spot because sinus-related mucus can persist even when allergies aren't the main driver. Ongoing sinus inflammation, whether from allergens, irritants, structural issues in the nasal passages, or lingering inflammation from a past infection, can cause your sinuses to continuously produce mucus that drains backward into the throat rather than forward out the nose. This is the classic mechanism behind postnasal drip, and it often creates a very specific sensation, a feeling of something dripping or pooling at the very back of the throat, especially noticeable when lying down, along with frequent throat clearing and sometimes a mild persistent cough. Because the mucus is coming from above, from the sinuses rather than the throat itself, throat-focused remedies like lozenges or throat sprays often bring only partial temporary relief. The source of the problem is sitting higher up. Simple saline nasal rinses done consistently rather than occasionally are one of the most commonly recommended approaches for this specific pattern because they help clear mucus and irritants directly from the nasal passages before they ever have the chance to drain downward. Now, reason number 2. Smoking, vaping, and other airway irritants. This one is more direct than the others, but its effects are often underestimated in how gradual and long-lasting they can be. Smoke, whether from cigarettes or from vaping devices, is a direct irritant to the delicate lining of your throat and airway. In response, your body ramps up mucus production as a protective measure, trying to shield those tissues from ongoing damage. What surprises a lot of people is that this heightened mucus production doesn't stop the moment someone quits. The airway tissue has often been irritated and inflamed for a long stretch of time, and it can take weeks or even months of being smoke-free before mucus production gradually settles back toward a normal baseline. It's also worth mentioning environmental irritants beyond smoking. Strong cleaning fumes, wood smoke from fireplaces, and heavy air pollution can all trigger a similar defensive mucus response, especially with repeated regular exposure. If this applies to you, patience really does matter here. Reduced irritant exposure is the essential first step, but expecting an overnight change often leads to unnecessary discouragement when the real improvement is still building quietly in the background. And now, reason number 1, the one that surprised me most when I first understood it, the throat clearing habit itself. Here's the strange, almost paradoxical truth. For a lot of people, especially those who've had some mild irritation from one of the reasons above, throat clearing didn't start as the problem. It started as the response. But over time, it can become the very thing keeping the mucus cycle going. Every time you forcefully clear your throat, you're causing a small amount of physical friction and irritation to the tissue lining your throat and vocal cords. Do this occasionally, and it's harmless. But do it dozens of times a day, every day, for months or years, and that tissue can become chronically irritated and mildly inflamed from the habit alone. And inflamed tissue, as we talked about earlier, responds by producing more mucus to protect itself, which then creates more of that something's stuck sensation, which then leads to more throat clearing. It becomes a quiet, self-sustaining loop where the original trigger may have faded months ago, but the habit built around it keeps the mucus feeling fresh and constant. This is genuinely one of the most under-recognized parts of chronic throat mucus because it doesn't feel like a habit, it feels like a necessity. It feels like you have to clear your throat because something really is there. But often, gently swallowing instead of forcefully clearing or taking a small sip of water instead can interrupt that cycle far more effectively than another aggressive throat clear ever will. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but many people who consciously replace throat clearing with a soft swallow or a small sip of water consistently for several weeks notice the urge itself gradually becoming less frequent and less intense. Now that we've gone through all 7 reasons, let's talk about one simple daily routine that can support healthier throat tissue no matter which of these triggers applies most to you. Consistent hydration paired with a warm, saline gargle. This isn't about a special product or an expensive remedy. It's genuinely this simple. First, spread your water intake evenly throughout the day rather than drinking a large amount all at once. Consistent hydration keeps the mucus your body naturally produces thinner and easier to swallow without you noticing it at all. Second, try a warm saline gargle once in the morning and once in the evening. Dissolve about half a teaspoon of salt into a cup of warm water, gargle gently for around 30 seconds, and spit it out. This simple practice can help soothe irritated throat tissue, loosen mucus that's clinging to the area, and gently rinse away allergens or irritants sitting at the back of the throat. Many people who try this consistently for 2 to 3 weeks report a noticeable difference, especially when it's combined with addressing whichever specific trigger from the list above applies to them. Before we wrap up, let's talk about 3 common mistakes that quietly work against people trying to solve this issue. The first mistake is treating throat mucus as one single problem with one single cause. As you've seen today, there are several very different mechanisms at play, from dehydration to reflux to allergies to habit. Trying the same generic remedy for all of them, like only using lozenges or only cutting dairy, often leads to disappointment simply because it isn't addressing the actual source in your specific case. The second mistake is aggressive throat clearing as a long-term coping strategy. As we discussed, this can quietly become part of the problem itself, keeping tissue irritated even after the original trigger has faded. The third mistake is expecting immediate results. Throat and sinus tissue, much like any other tissue in the body, takes time to calm down and heal, especially if it's been irritated for months or years. Most people who notice genuine improvement describe it happening gradually, over 2 to 4 weeks of consistent habits, not overnight. And one more important note before we close. If your throat mucus is accompanied by things like difficulty swallowing, unexplained weight loss, blood in your mucus, a persistent hoarse voice lasting more than a couple of weeks, or if it's getting steadily worse rather than better, please see a doctor. These are signs that deserve proper medical evaluation, and the habits and reasons we've covered today are meant to support general understanding, not replace that kind of professional care. If this video helped you understand your own throat a little better, consider giving it a thumbs up. It genuinely helps this information reach more people who are quietly dealing with the same frustrating sensation and wondering if anyone else understands it. And I'd love to know, out of these 7 reasons, which one sounds the most like your situation? Let me know in the comments below. Take care of that throat of yours. It works quietly in the background every single day, and a little bit of understanding can go a long way toward finally giving it some relief.